Hi everybody, I'm Bill Sanders and this is Watch Art Sci, the art and science of watch collection. Today is what I wanted to do. I wanted to take a look at some watches that were sort of the tip top, expensive, more than I can afford, probably more than most people can afford, but they have some features about them that are outstanding. And so what I wanted to do is say, well, let's look at these outstanding features and see if we can find them in some more affordable way. So let's do that. Now, the first one, I'm going to start with one of my favorite brands ever, and that's Grubel Force. Handmade is the name of the particular watch. And how they describe it, they say the feat begins with the regulating organ, entirely produced by hand in Grubel Force's workshop, including the balance spring fashioned from an alloy produced in-house. Only a few balance springs were cast at a time. And a balance spring is probably the toughest thing that there is in watchmaking. And these guys make it by hand rather than ordering one off the shelf, so to speak. Now, here, if we break it down, now, a Grubel Force handmade one costs $945,600. I can't afford that. I can't plan to afford it because it's just too much. It's assembled, decorated, and machined entirely by hand. 3 hands, hours, minutes, and small seconds, plus the tourbillon. It's got a 43.5 millimeter, that's how wide it is. They make 2 to 3 pieces a year, runs for 60 hours, and it runs at 21,600 semi-oscillations per hour, in other words, 3 hertz. Now, in order to approach that, a bunch of guys, myself included, formed a group called Lyric, and we started making watches. We're working on our third one now. We're just producing our second one. Is just coming out right now. Now, we set a list price of $29,901. That's without VAT. With VAT, it's 29,000 Swiss francs. Now, just about everything about this watch was handmade, and plus it has some things that were not available outside of Agenor. They were the company that made the movement. Now, what we did is very much different than Grubel and Force. We went to top elements. We went to top watchmakers. We went to top, I should say, movement makers, dial makers, strap makers, and most importantly, a movement maker, and that was Agenor. And they came up with one called the AGH 6802. Now, we had one earlier called the first one was AGH 6801, but there were some improvements and so forth, and they felt there were enough in there to do it. And they added what did they add? 2 things that were intellectual properties. One's called an Agen pit regulator, and the other one is called Agena's gear. These are gears in order to have no slippage at all. They have little springs in the teeth, and one of the gears has that. So it's not, it's not nothing. It's a really nice watch. 39 millimeter stainless steel. We had 100 made. It runs for 40 hours, and then again, it's 21,600 semi-oscillations. Now, we got this for what we got it for was a manufactured price, which we all kicked in and had it made. And so there was about a third of the, I guess you'd call the retail price. And so it was affordable to a lot more people, and yet it had a lot of the same characteristics. Now, we did not have a tourbillon, but we had things were handmade. They were from different parts of Switzerland. And so it's not, like I said, it's not the same, but it costs like a fraction of what is nearly $1 million. So that's one way to go about. That was why we did it. We really admire the horology of companies like Groupe Force, but none of us, are very few of us, I should say, can afford that. Now, um, another kind of production or a constant force element that I've always admired has been double barrels in parallel. Double barrels, if you have two barrels in your watch, they can either be in parallel or they can be in serial. The ones in serial let your watch run longer. So if you have double barrels in serial, your watch can probably run. Like they have this one I know that ran. They had it set up, I think, at 4 hertz, and then they have it. Well, they didn't have it, but they moved it to 3 hertz so that they could have a longer uh, reserve in it. Okay, so double barrels in parallel. Why do that? Well, the reason for having double barrels in parallel is that it's like sort of two horses pulling a cart. It's a lot easier on both of them rather than one horse pulling the same cart. Um, and the problem is really finding that many watches that have dual barrels in parallel. Now, one that I did find, and it's not easy to find, is Schwartz ETN Roma small seconds. It's a manual wound and it has a manufactured MSE 100. That's the name of the movement, the caliber movement. Twin barrels in parallel, 96 hours of power reserve, and 21,600 semi-oscillations per hour. Now, right now, the best price I could find on it was $11,176, but I did see one that had been sold for about half that. So that's sort of the best deal I could find. Now, more typical is like this FP Journe chronometre surveying. I have one of those. I love it. It's a great watch, double barrels and parallel, but the prices of these things have just really gone through the ceiling. $74,000. So another thing you can do is that I discovered double barrels in parallel in the FP Journe, but like I said, that's $74,000, basically $75,000, be more than that with the tax. It's just out of my range. When I got mine, I got a much lower price. I'll buy a lot. But the Schwartz ETN also has the same kind of mechanism. I think it's important for a constant force. Now, the final one is really interesting. It's the Fuan Chain. I found one in Longa Unsunda, Richard Longa, Longa Richard Longa pour la mer. And it's got a Fuan chain. I have no idea how they got it in there or not. But the way a Fuan chain works is that the chain-driven fusee is the mechanism that regulates the unwinding of the mainspring. And you can see in the little drawing I have there when it looks like a little pyramid, and the unwinding of it is, and the way it controls the mainspring is to have it longer, have the chain longer, where they want more of the mainspring to unwind, and shorter where they want less of it. And what that does is that where you have a really strong output, you don't need as much. And then where you have a weaker output from unwinding of the mainspring, you need more of it. And so that's what the chain does. Now, these you can find, but not on wristwatches. You can find them, I found a lot of them on pocket watches. Now, at the bottom right down there, you can see how fat the thing is, and just looking at how a Fuan chain works, it's a very cool thing for constant force. But let's face it, it's just too fat for most wristwatches. Anyway, those are some things. Those are three things that sort of ways in which people with limited incomes, which is most of us, is that we can sort of at least see something or have some experience with elements of far more expensive watches. Let me know what you think. If you have any of these watches we've talked about, I'd really like to hear from you. Until next time, this is Bill Standard for Watch Art Sci, the art and science of watch collection. By the way, this is an opportunity to subscribe if you like.